Now at McDonald's, a McDouble is only $2.50. So you can get your gym gains on or just get lunch for only $2.50. Get more value on the under $3 menu.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Have you ever looked at a painting and wondered who the person pictured was? Did you know that some of the most famous paintings in the world, like the Mona Lisa, are portraits of real women from history? If so, then I have the perfect podcast to share with you. The beautifully curated podcast, ArtMuse, which shares the life stories of the women pictured in famous works of art. In doing so, host Grace Anna aims to reshape the ways in which we interpret those well-known works by paying dues to the women whose images have been immortalized, but whose names and stories have been wrongfully overlooked. Each episode focuses on a specific female muse, sharing their important life and legacy. ArtMuse is currently in its third season, which focuses on women pictured in works of art who were performers in their own right. From Marian Anderson to Evelyn Nesbit to Sarah Bernhardt, these stories will keep you on the edge of your seat. For listeners of Stars of the Golden Age, you can have a really easy sampling right now of ArtMuse with the Sarah Bernhardt episodes right here in this feed. Please give ArtMuse a follow and listen to more episodes. For more information, you can check out their website, artmusepodcast.com, or just search ArtMuse wherever you get your podcasts. Enjoy the story of Sarah Bernhardt. It's a good one.
Today's episode contains sensitive topics, such as addiction and suicide. So if you are sensitive to this content, please listen at your own discretion. What is art without the muse? Many of Western art's most famous works are depictions of women. But who were these women? Do they have their own stories to share with the world? Hello and welcome to ArtMuse, a podcast that aims to reshape the ways in which we interpret well-known works of art by paying dues to the women whose images have been immortalized, but whose names and stories have been wrongfully overlooked. While these women's faces are familiar to viewers around the world, their identities have been largely forgotten. Together we will explore the important lives and legacy of the female muse and appreciate these works of art from a new perspective, through the eyes of the women whose image stares back at us. Is the muse in actuality just as, if not more, important than the artists themselves? And I'm your host, Grace Anna. Welcome to part 2 of ArtMuse's 2-part episode on Sarah Bernhardt. In part 1, we explored Sarah's lonely childhood, her mother's continued negligence, and later on, her time at both boarding school and the convent. We then explored Sarah's introduction to the theater, her time at the conservatoire, her failed beginnings at the Comédie Française, and eventually her first taste of success at the Odeon. Finally, we delved into Sarah's brave decision to stay behind in Paris and run a hospital for the wounded during the Franco-Prussian War, turning Sarah into a national hero. We left things off in our story just after the war had ended, and Sarah was preparing her big return back to the stage. Though the war had left Paris in ruins, life in the city gradually returned to normal, and with it came the reopening of France's national theaters. Not before long, Sarah was summoned back to the Odeon to begin rehearsals for their upcoming season. Before the war, Sarah had enjoyed relative success and was regarded as one of Paris's rising stars. But she was now ready to take her fame to the next level. As she wrote, "I was awaiting the event which was to consecrate me a star. I did not quite know what I was expecting, but I knew that my Messiah had to come." Luckily for Sarah, her Messiah was right around the corner, and with him would come fame and fortune beyond her wildest imagination. The poet Victor Hugo had just returned to Paris after 19 years of political exile in the Channel Islands. Hugo had been a staunch opponent of Napoleon III, but with the emperor's resignation after the war, Hugo was finally able to return to his homeland. To commemorate his return, the Odeon planned to open their season with a performance of one of Hugo's plays, Ruy Blas, and Sarah was set to star as the leading role of the Queen of Spain. And Hugo was so enthused by the idea of his play being performed again in Paris that he decided to direct the play himself. For the first rehearsal, Sarah went to Hugo's own home to do a preliminary reading of the script. From the start, Sarah was impressed by Hugo, and her admiration for him only grew over the course of the next few weeks as they prepared for opening night. Ruy Blas officially premiered in the early months of 1872. It was by far Sarah's most successful performance to date, and the play that would catapult her into a full-fledged celebrity. Before the performance even came to a close, the audience roared with applause, and by the time the curtains fell, Sarah was nearly mobbed by admirers. Sarah could hardly believe her eyes. As she later described, "I stood, breathless, dazed, and yet delighted by my success." And it wasn't just the audience that was left awestruck by Sarah's performance, but Victor Hugo himself fell to his knees. He took Sarah's hand, kissed it profusely, and declared her the greatest star that had ever graced the stage. In fact, Hugo was so enamored with Sarah's performance that the two embarked on a short-lived steamy affair. And despite the fact that Hugo was 70 and Sarah only 27, Sarah seemed equally enamored with him as well. As she remembered, he was so handsome that night, with his wide forehead, which seemed to retain the light, his thick, silvery fleece of hair, and his laughing, luminous eyes. Though Sarah's fling with Hugo may have been brief, Ruy Blas had a lasting impact on her career and turned her into an overnight sensation. Sarah would remain close friends with Hugo and work with him many times again over the course of her life. Within just a few months of Ruy Blas's opening, Sarah became one of the most sought-after actresses in all of Paris. And with her newfound success came a surprising offer. In the summer of 1872, Sarah received a letter from the director of the Comédie Française, asking if she would return to the company. With this invitation, he offered Sarah a staggering salary of 12,000 francs a year, a significant increase over her pay at the Odeon. Sarah was conflicted. Though she had left the Comédie Française under bad terms in her youth, it was France's leading national theater, and its significance was undeniable. At the same time, Sarah had grown attached to the Odeon and absolutely loved performing there. In an effort to stay, Sarah asked the director of the Odeon if he would be willing to match the Comédie Française's offer, but sadly he refused. Though Sarah did not want to leave the Odeon, the Comédie Française's offer was too tempting to turn down. As author Robert Gottlieb wrote, "The prestige of the Comédie Française and the higher salary, plus the satisfaction at being wooed back after her ignominious rout 9 years before, made Sarah's decision to return there worth it." But Sarah would always reflect fondly on her time at the Odeon. As she later wrote, "I left the Odeon with great respect, for I adored and still adore that theater. It was the theater that I loved the most, and that I only left with regret. We all loved each other at the Odeon. I was happy. We thought only of putting on plays. We rehearsed mornings, afternoons, all the time. I adored that, but I felt that my life of hoping and dreaming was to come to an end at the Comédie Française. I felt that the way was open for the fruition of all my dreams, and that life was about to commence. Unfortunately, the Odeon did not have as kind of parting words for Sarah. With over a year left on her contract, the Odeon actually sued Sarah for both breach of contract and business damages, and Sarah had to pay them 6,000 francs as a settlement. But Sarah knew that she had made the right decision. She was ready to elevate her career and return to Paris's biggest stage, this time as the city's leading actress. Sarah officially premiered at the Comédie Française in the fall of 1872. Within her first year, she starred in a number of leading roles. In many of these performances, Sarah's role included dramatic death scenes on stage, an act she mastered quickly and became famous for. To make these scenes more believable, Sarah visited morgues and hospitals to study the dying, and her performances were incredibly true to life. But of all her epic death scenes, the role Sarah became most famous for was Phèdre from Racine's celebrated tragedy, a role which demanded a dramatic death by poison finale. The role of Phèdre was both emotionally and physically taxing, and showcased Sarah's immense talent as an actress. To see Sarah perform Phèdre was an unforgettable experience. As a review from 1908 read, "To hear the words of Phèdre spoken from the mouth of Bernhardt, to watch in the culminating horror of crime and of remorse, of jealousy, of rage, of desire, and of despair. All the dark forces of destiny crowd down upon that great spirit, that indeed it is to come close to immortality, to plunge, shuddering through infinite abysses, and to look, if only for a moment, upon eternal light." Sarah would go on to perform Phèdre all over the world, and it is today the role she is most remembered for. Sarah went on to enjoy many successful seasons at the Comédie Française, but she soon became famous for more than just her acting. Her fun-loving and quirky personality began to catch the attention of her fellow cast and crew, and tales of her antics behind the scenes rapidly spread. As the playwright Octave Feuillet once wrote of Sarah, "Unlike the other actresses, she turns up at rehearsals dressed to kill, velvet from head to foot, with her hair all frizzy, and usually holding upon a bunch of flowers. She rehearses seriously, the way she's supposed to, sometimes striking beautiful poses. Then, when the scene's over, she bursts into dance, jumps around, sits down at the piano to accompany herself. Then she stands up and marches around like a circus clown. What a strange girl. There's nothing more charming than watching Sarah." The public also took notice of Sarah's forward-thinking and unusual fashion sense. Sarah was never one to follow the crowd, and paid no mind to the fashion norms of her day. Instead, she dressed herself in completely original and jaw-dropping outfits. Sarah often wrapped herself in black lace and exotic furs made from ocelots, chinchillas, and beavers. And she chose equally daring hats to match, on one occasion even wearing a hat made from a stuffed bat. To bring her visions to life, Sarah commissioned many of Paris's leading fashion designers to design her own personal clothes, a task that designers found incredibly exciting. As author Catherine Reef wrote, Sarah dressed not in accordance with fashion, but according to her own idea of how to present herself to the world. She made fashion. And as author Robert Gottlieb wrote, Sarah never dressed like anyone else, and since she didn't behave like anyone else either, she fascinated the entire world. And it's certainly true that Sarah did not behave like anyone else the public had ever seen. word quickly spread of her growing menagerie of animals, including a monkey named Darwin and a parrot named Bizboozon. Her private zoo would only become more and more notorious as the years went on, and she continued to expand her collection of wild animals. The public was also shocked to hear that Sarah slept in her own coffin and even traveled in her coffin on tours. It's true that Sarah kept her own coffin in her bedroom, but her decision to sleep in it was much more tragic than she may have let on. When her sister Regine was dying of tuberculosis in 1873, Sarah let her sleep in her own bed, while Sarah slept next to her in her coffin. But this did not stop Sarah from capitalizing on the public's fascination with her, and she posed in her own coffin with her eyes closed and hands folded across her chest for a famous photograph, which was widely published by the press. In the summer of 1878, Sarah stunned the public yet again when she took off in an untethered hot air balloon, flying over that year's Universal exhibition. Always dressed to impress, Sarah looked every bit an adventurer, wearing a long detective jacket, buckled white headscarf, and riding boots. And as she ascended over the exhibition's crowd, Sarah threw rose petals down to her admirers, who gawked at her from below. Sarah found the experience of flying absolutely enchanting. So much so that she published a short novella based on her experience later that year, the first book of many that she would publish in her lifetime. Titled In the Clouds, Sarah described the magical feeling of ascending into the air. As she wrote, "I find a sky, blue, and a sun, radiant. Around and about us the cloud mountains, opaque with rainbow-hued crets. It is astonishing, not a sound, not even a whisper." Sarah proved herself to not just be an accomplished actress and bold adventurer, but also a highly imaginative and skilled writer. In the Clouds quickly became a bestseller and flew off the shelves. Sarah became equally notorious for her many love affairs. Soon after joining the Comédie Française, Sarah enjoyed a steamy romance with the theater's rising male star, Jean Mounet-Sully. The public could not get enough of their relationship. Both stunningly good-looking and with equally eccentric personalities, Sarah and Mounet-Sully likened the perfect match. This was furthered by the fact that Sarah and Mounet-Sully often performed as co-stars, their romance flourishing on and off the stage. Sadly, Sarah and Mounet-Sully were not the perfect couple the press made them out to be. Both tempestuous by nature, Sarah and Mounet-Sully bickered constantly. This was made worse by the fact that Mounet-Sully was especially possessive of Sarah, at times resulting in violent fits. And so, after a 2.5-year turbulent relationship, Sarah parted ways with her co-star. But never one to wallow in sadness, Sarah quickly found a new lover, this time Samuel Pozzi, her gynecologist and notorious ladies' man. Sarah was also rumored to have had an affair with the Prince of Wales. And through these many affairs, Sarah never hid the fact that she was unmarried and a single mother. Instead, she reveled in both her sexuality and independence, and never let society's judgments stop her from satiating her sexual desires. We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
I sold my car in Carvana last night.
Well, that's cool.
No, you don't understand. It went perfectly. Real offer, down to the penny. They're picking it up tomorrow. Nothing went wrong.
So, what's the problem?
That is the problem. Nothing in my life goes as smoothly. I'm waiting for the catch.
Maybe there's no catch.
That's exactly what a catch would want me to think.
Wow, you need to relax.
I need to knock on wood. Do we have wood? Is this table wood?
I think it's laminate.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's close enough.
Car selling without a catch. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. Now as much a public figure as she was an admired actress, it's only fitting that artists sought to capture Sarah's portrait on canvas. Most famously, Sarah was painted by portraitist Georges Clairon in 1876. In Clairon's large-scale portrait, we find Sarah seductively seated on a red velvet couch. She leans her arm against a golden pillow, and her legs delicately dangle from the couch's edge, showing off her black lace shoes. Curled at her feet is a wolfhound, one of Sarah's trusted companions, who looks up at us with disinterest. Sarah is garbed in a white satin dress, which twists and turns along with the curves of her body, teasing us with its suggestion. She stares directly at the viewer, batting her piercing blue eyes at us nonchalantly. Here, Sarah is the epitome of chic, and we are privileged to just be in her presence. Clairon's portrait of Sarah was exhibited at that year's Paris Salon and received glowing reviews. But no one was as big of a fan of her portrait as Sarah herself. Sarah kept her portrait with her as a prized possession for the rest of her life. She also remained very close friends with Clairon for over 40 years, until his death in 1919. And Sarah was far more than just an artist model. What is lesser known about Sarah is that she herself was an established sculptor, and even exhibited her work at the prestigious Paris Salon. Sarah first began studying sculpture in the 1860s. Her earliest works were mainly small-scale portrait busts. As her passion for sculpture grew, Sarah decided to pursue her practice more seriously and began training with the academic sculptor Mathieu Meunier. By 1874, Sarah rented her own artist studio in Montmartre, a space that would later be used by Picasso. Here, Sarah could fully devote herself to her craft. In a famous photograph of Sarah taken in 1878, we see her proudly posing in her studio. With a scalpel in hand, Sarah leans against a pedestal. On top of the pedestal is a bust, presumably a self-portrait, which creates an almost mirror-like effect. Sarah is garbed in her signature sculptor's outfit, a white button-down shirt, a short white scarf, and white linen pants. Though it may not seem radical by today's standards, the fact that Sarah was wearing pants as a woman was almost unheard of for her time. Just as she boldly played male roles on the stage, Sarah was not afraid to take on the role of male sculptor in her studio. And her outfit was not just for show. Sarah took her sculptural practice extremely seriously. As time went on, her skills as a sculptor excelled. While her early work mainly consisted of portrait busts, Sarah was eventually able to sculpt complex and theatrical scenes. She also mastered a number of different mediums, including marble, terracotta, and bronze. Her sculptures were accepted into the Paris Salon as early as 1874, and she would continue to exhibit her works there for many years to come. Scholars have identified at least 50 original works made by Sarah throughout her lifetime. In today's episode, we'll explore two of Sarah's standout works made during this period. The first, titled After the Storm, is one of the most impressive of Sarah's entire oeuvre. Sculpted in 1878, Sarah depicts a peasant woman cradling the limp body of her grandson, who had just been pulled out of the sea after getting caught in a fisherman's net. The tragic scene was based on a real event that Sarah had witnessed in Brittany, which resulted in the young boy's death. But in her fictionalized version, Sarah leaves us with a glimmer of hope. The boy's lower arm grips his grandmother's dress, suggesting that he may still be clinging on to life. Clearly in reference to Michelangelo's Pietà, here Sarah translates the famous biblical scene into her own personal terms, showing the tragedies of her own people and country. Sarah's sculpture is rendered in a way that feels extremely true to life. She has captured the limpness of the boy's body, the strain of his grandmother's neck, and the burrows of her forehead with impeccable realism. And her masterful achievement was not overlooked in her time. Not only was After the Storm accepted into that year's Paris Salon, but it received an honorable mention, and Sarah was subsequently awarded a silver medal. Sarah impressed critics yet again in 1880, when she sculpted her own self-portrait as the mythological creature Chimera. Chimera in Greek mythology is a creature composed of different parts, most commonly the head of a woman, the wings of a bird, and the body of a lion. Chimera was a common artistic theme in the late 19th century, but it was not without its problems. As the Art Institute of Chicago's website explains, chimeras were objects of fascination for visual artists across styles and mediums. The obsessive interest in female iterations of these creatures by male artists were connected to the notion of the femme fatale, a seductive woman who lures men into perilous situations. This deeply misogynist fantasy framed women as inherently dangerous and animalistic in their supposedly primal sexual predation. Though Sarah has decided to depict herself as this part human, part animal creature, here instead she has reclaimed Chimera as a means of female empowerment, and by inserting her own image into Chimera, she has rewritten its mythology. As the Art Institute of Chicago's website continues, Bernhardt cleverly reappropriates the imagery of the Chimera in the service of positive self-promotion. As Chimera, Sarah is all-powerful and in charge of her own narrative. Though Sarah was unafraid to be a female trailblazer in the male-dominated world of sculpture, many of her male associates were less than pleased. Rodin in particular dismissed Sarah's talent and called her sculptures old-fashioned. She was constantly under attack in the press, and many men found it inappropriate for an actress to pursue an art as formal as sculpture. Fortunately, some men did come to her defense, most famously the novelist Émile Zola, who declared on Sarah's behalf, "She is reproached for not having stuck to dramatic art, to have taken up sculpture, painting, heaven knows what else. How droll! Not content with finding her thin or declaring her mad, they want to regulate her daily activities. One is freer in prison." And Sarah herself paid these critics little mind. With her head held high, she continued to produce sculptures for the rest of her life and exhibited her work all over the world. All while Sarah busied herself with her artistic career, she continued to perform at the Comédie Française, where her fame as an actress only skyrocketed. Soon, stories of Sarah spread across Europe, and countries outside of France were eager to host Paris's hottest actress. In the summer of 1879, Sarah was invited to London to perform in their upcoming season. Upon arrival, Sarah was greeted by dukes, duchesses, counts, and lords, and even became friendly with Oscar Wilde. Sarah performed over the course of a 6-week season and blew English audiences away with her naturalistic and heart-wrenching performances. She also arranged for her sculptures to be exhibited at a gallery in Piccadilly, an opening which was attended by the Prince of Wales. and Sarah became equally notorious for her antics. She dressed in ways the English had never before seen, and shocked the public when she purchased a small zoo of animals, including a cheetah and wolfhound. As the English writer Henry James wrote of Sarah's time in London, the intensity, the ecstasy, the insanity, as some people would say, of curiosity and enthusiasm provoked by Mademoiselle Bernhardt was impossible to describe. Though Sarah's time in London was short, she left a lasting impact on its social scene and sent shockwaves through the city that would be felt long after her leave. Unfortunately, Sarah's return to Paris was not as glamorous. Tensions had slowly been rising between Sarah and the director of the Comédie Française, Émile Perrin, for some time, and they were about to come to a boil. A few weeks after her return, Sarah was cast in a production of L'Aventurier. But as Sarah began rehearsing for the performance, she fell gravely ill. She asked to postpone opening night so that she could recover, but Perrin refused to give her any time off. This was not the first time that Perrin was unsympathetic towards Sarah's bad health. He also often used derogatory language when speaking to Sarah, in one letter even ridiculing her, quote, horrible Jewish nose. So when Sarah was forced to perform on L'Aventurier's opening night, despite her impaired health, she had hit a breaking point. To make matters worse, Sarah received bad reviews from the press after understandably giving a lackluster performance. For Sarah, this was the final straw. She immediately wrote an angry letter to Perrin demanding her resignation from the Comédie Française. As Sarah declared, "You have compelled me to play when I was not ready. I was very unwilling to appear before the public. You absolutely insisted. What I foresaw has happened. The result of the performance has surpassed my anticipations. It is my first rebuff at the Comédie Française, and it shall be my last. By the time you receive this letter, I shall have left Paris. Will you kindly accept my immediate resignation? And believe me, yours sincerely, Sarah Bernhardt." By the time Perrin received Sarah's letter, she had not only left Paris, but had leaked copies of her letter to the press. Perrin had not only lost his biggest star, but was exposed to the public as the emotionally abusive director he was. Though Perrin sued Sarah for breach of contract and she was forced to pay him 10,000 francs, Sarah walked away as the real winner. Not only was she able to maintain her own dignity, but she found her independence from the Comédie Française liberating. As Sarah wrote, "After this first taste of freedom, I felt surer of life than ever before. Although my constitution was very weak, the ability to do as I wanted without interference or out of anyone's control calmed my nerves, and with a strengthened immune system, my health, which had been undetermined by perpetual irritations and excessive work, restored itself." Within a few weeks, Sarah was invited back to London, where she enjoyed a successful season performing with her own troupe. Sarah not only felt lighter after leaving the Comédie Française, but she came to the powerful realization that she could be just as, if not more, successful on her own. Instead of returning to Paris that summer, Sarah decided to continue the tour with her troupe, this time to Brussels and Copenhagen, where she met the Danish king. In every city that Sarah went, she was greeted by swarms of fans and admirers, and her confidence in herself grew with each day. So when, in the fall of 1880, Sarah was invited to travel to New York and tour North America, she jumped on the opportunity. The tour would span a total of 7 months, and she would be paid top salary. She officially embarked on her American escapade on October 15th. As she boarded a steamship headed for New York, Sarah must have been filled with both anticipation and delight over the adventures that awaited her on the other side. But Sarah would first have to endure the 11-day voyage to New York. And in typical Sarah fashion, it was not without its drama. According to her own memoir, Sarah helped a young woman give birth in the middle of the night and saved an elderly woman's life when a massive wave crashed upon the ship deck. Though she didn't know it at the time, that elderly woman happened to be none other than Mary Todd Lincoln, the widow of Abraham Lincoln. Sarah arrived in New York on October 27th. As she sailed into New York's harbor, she was met by a crowd of over 1,000 people, there to greet Paris's greatest star. Americans were fascinated by not only her impressive acting career, but also her notorious public stunts and scandalous affairs. On her opening night in New York, crowds lined several city blocks in hopes of seeing her perform. Though few in the audience spoke any French, her first performance caused a sensation. Sarah went on to have an immensely successful few weeks in New York. Afterwards, she set off to tour the country, appearing in over 50 different cities. And she traveled to each of these places in style, in her own private railroad car, equipped with stained glass windows, lavish lamps, and even a grand piano. One of Sarah's most memorable adventures during her tour was meeting Thomas Edison. On her way from New York to Boston, Sarah stopped to visit Edison's home, where he showed her his latest invention, the phonograph, and recorded her reciting a monologue. Along the tour, she also purchased a pet alligator, whom she named Ali Gaga. Ali Gaga followed Sarah everywhere and even slept in her bed. Unfortunately, Ali Gaga did not survive long after being fed a diet of champagne and milk. Sarah's American tour was overall an immense success, but she did certainly have her critics. While bohemian circles appreciated Sarah's unconventional lifestyle, religious groups, especially those who preached American Puritanism, criticized her for having many affairs and an illegitimate son. Unfortunately, Sarah was also a victim of anti-Semitism, and caricatures calling her a, quote, money-hungry Jew circulated in the press. In fact, when she traveled to Montreal, she even received threats from Catholic communities reprimanding her for performing there as a Jewish woman. But despite their protests, Sarah was too strong of a force to stop, and her fame was inevitable. As Robert Gottlieb rightfully wrote, whatever the reactions to her acting and her morals, wherever she went, she was first and foremost an event. Excitement about her arrival whipped up an avalanche of publicity, and accompanied by countless interviews, concocted anecdotes, and commercial capitalization. By the time her tour came to an end, in May of 1881, Sarah had performed on over 150 stages across America and Canada, and had reached a level of stardom never before seen. And more than fame, Sarah's American tour had given her something invaluable: complete and resolute faith in herself. As Sarah reflected in her memoir, "This was really the first halting period of my life, the real evolution of my physical and moral being. I had run away from the Comédie Française, from Paris, from France, from my family and from my friends. In those few months, my mind had matured and the brusqueness of my will was softened. My life, which I had thought at first was to be so short, seemed now likely to be very, very long. And that gave me a great mischievous delight whenever I thought of the infernal displeasure of my enemies. I resolved to live. I resolved to be the great artist that I longed to be. And from the time of this return, I gave myself entirely up to my life." Soon after returning to Paris, Sarah decided to take off again, this time on a 6-month tour across Europe. This European tour was one of the most successful tours of Sarah's entire career. In each city she arrived, she was greeted by swarming crowds and performed to sold-out audiences. And in many of these audiences were some of the most powerful men in all of Europe, including Tsar Alexander III, King Alfonso XII, Emperor Franz Joseph I, and the King of Italy. But sadly, her European tour was not without its hardships. As in parts of America and Canada, Sarah did come face to face with anti-Semitism. In fact, in Kiev and Odessa, mobs even threw stones at her because she was Jewish. As Sarah did with most things in life, she took these tougher moments in stride and did not let them stop her from basking in her own glory. Sarah's European tour was not only a pivotal point in her career, but also in her personal life. While touring St. Petersburg, Sarah met a young Greek diplomat named Aristides Damala and fell madly in love with him. 11 years her younger, Damala was extremely handsome, with dark, alluring eyes and luscious brown hair. But he was not without his red flags. Damala was a notorious ladies' man who had quite a troubling track record. His previous affairs had already led to 2 divorces, 1 suicide, and even a ban from the French government, who ordered Damala to leave Paris. Unfortunately, Sarah was too smitten with Damala to pay his unsettling dating history much mind. Whether Damala reciprocated Sarah's feelings or not is debatable. Either way, he certainly jumped on the opportunity to associate himself with the world's greatest actress, and not before long, the two had begun an affair. Though Damala had no prior acting experience, Sarah decided to cast him as her leading man for all the remaining performances of the tour. Once again, Sarah's rose-colored glasses blinded her to the fact that Damala was completely inept as an actor. Just as impulsively, on April 4th, 1882, during a stop in London, Sarah decided to marry Damala, astonishing not only her friends and family, but the entire world. Sarah later told her friends that she wanted to marry Damala because it was the only thing left she hadn't yet experienced. Whether she was blinded by love or seeking a new thrill, Sarah's decision to marry Damala would be one of her greatest life regrets. It didn't take long for Damala's bad habits to come to the surface. He began indulging in his wandering eye, gambling away massive amounts of Sarah's money, and even used her money to buy expensive gifts for his mistresses. Jealous of Sarah's success, he made scenes at her performances and publicly humiliated her at every chance he had. He even called her derogatory names like, quote, the Jewess with a long nose. He also became heavily addicted to morphine, squandering even more of Sarah's money on his drug use. Sarah overlooked Damala's destructive and hurtful behavior for as long as she could, unwilling to accept that her husband could possibly care this little about her. But when she was forced to sell off her own jewelry to pay his accumulating bills, Sarah had to reckon with the harsh reality that her husband was taking clear advantage of her. Sarah eventually mustered up the strength to throw Damala out. He ended up dying of a drug overdose a few years later, at the age of 34. As one of Sarah's friends recalled, "To me, Damala was the most cold-blooded, cynical, and worthless individual whom I had ever met." Fortunately, Sarah was able to recoup most of the money she had lost through tours and performances. And though her husband did not love her in the way she deserved, the public certainly did. In the years to come, Sarah's success and international fame as the best actress of her generation only grew. When she wasn't busy performing in Paris and London, she continued to tour all over the world. In 1886, Sarah set off on a 13-month-long tour through the Americas, including South America. Sarah loved the thrill of touring in places she had never before been, and delighted in the new experiences each tour brought with it. As she told a journalist upon her leave, "I passionately love this life of adventures. I detest knowing in advance what they are going to serve at my dinner, and I detest 100,000 times more knowing what will happen to me. For better or worse, I adore the unexpected." Her tour through South America certainly did not disappoint. Sarah performed in Brazil, Argentina, Cuba, Chile, and Ecuador, where she even went crocodile hunting. And the government of Argentina was so impressed with her that they deeded her 13,000 acres of land that Sarah had no idea how to locate and never saw. In 1888, Sarah set off again, this time for Egypt and Turkey. And in 1891, she embarked on her most extensive tour yet, a tour that would take her across the globe, spanning Europe, the Americas, and Australia, and take 2.5 years to complete. She even traveled to remote islands like Hawaii and Samoa. And Sarah did not travel lightly. Her entourage lugged a whopping 75 crates filled with personal clothing, 45 crates filled with costumes, and trunks filled with perfume and makeup. And of course, they would need extra trunks to fill with Sarah's ever-increasing income. At the end of her 2.5-year tour, Sarah had amassed a staggering 3.5 million francs. But touring had much greater value to Sarah than money. It allowed her to live the life of independence and adventure that she had always dreamed of. As author Robert Gottlieb wrote, "Her energy was inexhaustible, her determination implacable, her fame unparalleled. There was practically nowhere she hadn't performed. Her touring was not just a matter of making money or of expanding her reputation. She loved it for its own sake. She loved being on the move." And Sarah herself once declared, "I often take the train or steamer without even asking where I'm going. What does it matter to me? I am delighted to be off and full of joy at getting back again. There's genuine and happy excitement in moving from place to place and covering so much ground." We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers. Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. When Sarah managed to sit still, artists continued to flock to paint her portrait. There are a number of portraits of Sarah from this high point in her career. One of the most notable is by Louise Abema, who painted Sarah's portrait in 1883. Louise Abema was one of the most prominent female artists of the Belle Epoque period. She was also a leading member of Paris's lesbian community. Sarah and Louise were very close. They made portraits of one another and even posed in provocative photographs together. In fact, some scholars have suggested that Sarah and Louise were lovers, proposing the possibility that Sarah may have been bisexual. Whatever the nature of their relationship was, it's clear that the two women had great respect for one another. And that respect is palpable in Louise Abema's portrait of Sarah. Pictured with a diamond tiara on top of her head, Sarah sits tall like a queen on her throne. Her face is in profile, and her eyes gaze above, as if she is looking up to the heavens. Here, Sarah is regal, confident, and majestic, and is every bit the international icon she had worked hard to become. In return, Sarah sculpted Louise in 1878. All through her years performing on the world's greatest stages, Sarah never abandoned her own artistic practice. In fact, her skills as a sculptor only improved, evident in Sarah's masterful portrait of Louise. Sculpted in marble, Sarah depicts Louise with impeccable detail. You can see the folds of her styled hair, her slightly pursed lips, and inquisitive eyebrows. Sarah has portrayed Louise staring downwards, averting our gaze, giving her an air of mystery. It's clear that there is an intimacy between sitter and artist, and that Louise holds the secrets to the depths of their connection. Sarah continued to exhibit her works through her mid-age. In 1893, her sculptures were shown at the Columbia Exposition in Chicago, and in 1900, her works were included in the Exposition Universelle. It was also around this time that Sarah leased her own theater in Paris, the Théâtre de la Renaissance. Sarah not only starred in her own theater's productions, but was its artistic director and manager. She oversaw every detail of the theater, from designing costumes and sets, to lighting, and even the theater's finances. She also imposed her own set of rules, including removing prompters boxes so that actors had to memorize their lines, and prohibiting women from wearing hats so as not to block anyone's view. Her plays were performed in the dramatic style she had become famous for, not the more subdued school of acting that was becoming popular at the turn of the century. As Sarah declared, "In my theater, the natural is good, but the sublime is even better." Sarah ran the Théâtre de la Renaissance for 5 successful years. Yet, despite the theater's popularity, Sarah did not prove to be the most business savvy, and her debts began to accumulate. And unfortunately, by 1898, she was forced to surrender the Théâtre de la Renaissance. But as she prepared a world tour to make back the money she had lost, Sarah got word that another theater was up for lease in Paris, one much larger and more magnificent, the Théâtre de Paris. Sarah could not resist the chance of opening another theater, one she swore would be even more spectacular than the Théâtre de la Renaissance. And so, in January of 1899, Sarah signed a 25-year lease with the city of Paris and renamed the Théâtre de Paris the Théâtre Sarah Bernhardt. The theater had a lot of potential. Its audience was twice the size of the Théâtre de la Renaissance and could hold over 1,700 seats. The stage was enormous, and the backstage was large enough to accommodate several different dressing rooms. But Sarah had big dreams for her theater, and she immediately began renovating the space to fit her vision. She covered the walls in yellow velvet, hung glittering chandeliers from the ceilings, and built a 5-room private backstage suite where she could dine, entertain guests, and even spend the night. On the facade, Sarah spelled out her own name, illuminated by over 5,000 light bulbs, and in the lobby, she hung life-size portraits of herself dressed in her famous roles. The Théâtre Sarah Bernhardt officially opened its doors on January 21, 1899. As with the Théâtre de la Renaissance, Sarah assumed full control of her theater. She not only starred in her own productions, but also directed and produced them. She hired her own actors, designed the costumes and sets, and took charge of the theater's finances. She also oversaw the theater's promotion. To advertise her new theater, Sarah partnered with the Czech artist Alphonse Mucha, who designed a series of posters of her. The posters are nothing short of breathtaking. Made in the Art Nouveau style, each poster is a different life-sized image of Sarah in costume, standing proudly like a divine figure. Sarah continued to work with Mucha over the course of the next many years, and he even began designing some of her sets, costumes, and programs. Though she now wore many hats, Sarah absolutely blossomed on the stage of her own theater. Here at the Théâtre Sarah Bernhardt, she played a number of roles that she is best known for today. Many were strong female characters, like Joan of Arc, Queen Elizabeth, and Marie Antoinette. But Sarah also played a number of leading male roles. a bold move for a female actress of her time. Most famously, Sarah played the role of Hamlet. Though in her mid-50s, Sarah saw no issues with playing the young and masculine prince. In fact, there's a surviving video from 1900 of Sarah playing Hamlet with vivacious energy. As author Robert Gottlieb described the video, "Sarah is remarkably effective. Sarah was then 56, and she not only looks 20 years younger, but can easily be taken for a male and a prince. She's somber, quick, natural, easily expert with her sword, and clearly used to dueling. There's nothing campy or feminine about her. She's manly, and she's coolly resolved. It's certainly a vindication of her right to perform the greatest male roles and a welcome clue as to how she pulled it off." Unfortunately, not everyone was as taken with Sarah's bold choice. From the start, Sarah's performance as Hamlet caused an uproar, and men in particular took offense. As one French reporter complained, "It wasn't enough for her to obliterate all of her female rivals. Is she now going into competition with all the men as well?" And when Sarah brought her performance to America, the controversy followed. As the American novelist William Dean Howells wrote, "I dismiss her Hamlet as triple impertinence, not merely French and feminine, but Jewish as well." But Sarah held her head high and stayed true to her own artistry. Unbothered by the criticism, she continued to play male roles for the rest of her career. As Sarah once explained, "A good actress, with the appearance befitting the part and the intelligence to comprehend it, can play the man as well as the woman. It is simply another character for her to identify with herself." Sarah was also in her 50s when she purchased an abandoned fort in Brittany, which she turned into a beloved summer home. In August of 1894, Sarah was vacationing at the Brittany seashore when she noticed a small wind-blown island called Belle Isle. As she explored the sparse island, she noticed an abandoned fort. Covered in wildflowers and vine, the fort felt like a time capsule to another era. Sarah felt an instant connection with it and set off to call this desolate little fort her home. She soon after bought the fort and its surrounding land from the French government. Over the years, Sarah renovated and enlarged the fort to become an idyllic summer estate. Here, Sarah shared many blissful summers with family and friends. She raised her own cows, sheep, and chicken, and grew her own produce. She fished for shrimp, paddled in the sea, and hosted decadent picnics. And she particularly enjoyed challenging her guests to a game of tennis. But most importantly, Sarah could be her authentic self at Belle Isle. Away from the public and press, Sarah could enjoy the simplicities of life out of the spotlight. As a friend of hers wrote of his visit to Belle Isle, "During the whole time I stayed there, Sarah never mentioned the theater, acting, or actors. She was irresistibly comic at times, full of bubbling gaiety and spirits. What struck me most about her when I saw her in private life was her radiant and ever-present common sense. There was no nonsense about her, no pose and no posturing. She was completely natural. She took herself for granted as being the greatest actress in the world." As idyllic as Belle Isle was, reality would soon come crashing down with the start of World War I. For Sarah, the war would not only mark the beginning of a new world, but also the beginning of a new life. In June of 1914, while spending the summer at Belle Isle, Sarah received the shocking news that Archduke Franz Ferdinand had been assassinated and that Europe had broken out in a war. She hurried back to Paris with her son to grab some belongings and took refuge in Andernos-les-Bains, a rural seaside town in the south of France. But the journey took a toll on Sarah's health, which had been already steadily declining over the past few years. Her biggest concern was chronic pain in her right knee. In 1906, during a performance of La Tosca, Sarah jumped to her death scene, not realizing that there was no mattress below to catch her fall. Her knee crashed directly onto the wooden stage. Though Sarah continued her tour, from that time onwards, she lived with severe chronic pain. So when a year into the war, a doctor discovered that her same leg had developed gangrene, Sarah decided she had had enough. And at the age of 71, no longer wanting to live a life of pain, Sarah arranged for her right leg to be amputated. As Sarah wrote to her son, "My mind is made up. I am not going on suffering. I have perhaps 10 or 15 years to live. Why condemn me to suffering another 15 years? With a wooden leg, I will be able to recite, maybe even perform." Though her friends and family were horrified, Sarah couldn't wait to rid herself of her chronic pain, and she went into her surgery calm and confident. Fortunately, the operation went smoothly, and her right leg was successfully amputated from above the knee to her hip. In the months following her amputation, Sarah tried a number of different wooden legs, but found them both painful and unappealing. Eventually, Sarah arranged to be carried around in a white sedan chair, which she had decorated in the style of King Louis XV. Like a queen on her throne, Sarah would be carried from place to place in her personal chair for the rest of her life. And Sarah did not let her new condition stop her from continuing to perform. As she once said, "There is always a way. In case of necessity, I shall have myself strapped to the scenery." She also did not let her amputated leg prevent her from helping France's war efforts. In 1916, Sarah performed for over 3,000 soldiers on the war front. As the actress that accompanied her, Béatrice Dussault, described, "I witnessed the genius of Sarah and her bravery. Once I had to help her dress. She went from chair to table, leaning on my arm, or hopping on her poor 72-year-old leg, saying with that infectious laugh of hers, 'Look, I'm just like a guinea hen.' The way she ignored her handicap was beautiful, a victory of her spirit over the failing flesh. One didn't pity her, one admired her. I shall always remember her, that old woman of genius, clopping around in her sedan chair or on one leg, ready to give her flaming heart to those brave men who were fighting and dying for us." And when Sarah returned to Paris later that year, she even went on to make 2 short films intended to boost French morale and garner national support. It should be noted that Sarah was one of the first actresses to ever star in a moving picture. Sarah was featured in a moving picture as early as 1900 and went on to make 11 films in total. The film with the widest circulation and which turned Sarah into arguably the first international movie star was Queen Elizabeth. Filmed in 1912 when Sarah was 68 years old, Queen Elizabeth was a groundbreaking film. As the director of Paramount, Adolf Zucker, explained, Sarah's performance was of historical importance because it went a long way towards breaking down the prejudice of theatrical people towards the screen. Starring in films also made Sarah more accessible to the broader public, and people who had not had the chance to see her on stage could now experience her on the screen. As author Robert Gottlieb wrote, "It must have seemed glorious to defy the limitations of space and have the whole world as her audience." We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers. Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. Sarah's amputation also did not hold her back from going on a final American tour in 1916, nor did traveling across the Atlantic at the height of the war, at risk of German attack. It seemed nothing would stop the fearless Sarah from embarking on a final American adventure. Sarah went on to perform in nearly 100 cities in the span of 14 months. To accommodate her amputation, she adjusted her performances to short scenes in which she could remain seated. Sarah also used her tour as an opportunity to rally American support behind France's war efforts. She often ended her performances with passionate speeches urging Americans to join the Allies' fight. Sarah also spoke openly in support of the women's suffrage movement and condemned racism. On one occasion, she even stood with a black woman who was being denied entry into a hotel that Sarah was staying at. As Sarah once said, "I think the ostracism in which blacks are held by the whites is odious." When Sarah returned to France in late 1918, she was greeted with the happy news that the Allied powers had won the war. She spent these post-war years running the Théâtre Sarah Bernhardt, still performing in her own performances through her 70s. When she wasn't busy with her own theater, Sarah taught acting classes to young students. She also wrote down her own reflections on acting, which was eventually edited into her book, The Art of Theater. In these reflections, Sarah declares that acting is not about imitation, but rather really living each role you play. As she wrote, "I contend that it is necessary to feel all the sentiments that agitate the soul of the character. The artist's personality must be left in the dressing room. The actor cannot divide his personality between himself and his part. He loses his ego during the time he remains on the stage. We must make our characters live, and in no way can we do this better than by quitting our own personality to enter that of another being." But as Sarah reached her late 70s, her aging body finally caught up with her inexhaustible spirit. On top of the shock of losing her leg, Sarah also developed a severe kidney disorder in her late age. Her son tried to convince her to retire from the stage, but Sarah refused to leave the spotlight. As author Catherine Reef wrote, "Sarah Bernhardt was loved by many. Older fans recalled her when she was in her prime. Younger ones saw her as a living legend, a symbol of France. She could still fill theaters and earn loud applause." But in 1922, after Sarah collapsed during the dress rehearsal of a new play and went into a coma, she was forced to slow down. Fortunately, Sarah recovered over the course of the next few weeks. When she came to, her first words were, "When do I go on?" Though forced to retire from the stage, in 1923, Sarah jumped on the opportunity to star in a film called The Fortune Teller. She was so weak that the director had to arrange for the film to be shot in Sarah's own house, where she could rest in between scenes. But unfortunately, Sarah's kidney disease progressed so severely that she was unable to finish the film. Now bedridden, Sarah teetered between life and death over the course of the next few weeks. By March, it was clear that Sarah was nearing the end of her life. Surrounded by her son and close friends, Sarah did not let her impending death put a damper on her final days. As one friend described, Sarah had the indescribable desire to charm still, to charm right up to the gates of death itself. When in the final hours reporters began to swarm her house, Sarah joked, "I'll keep them dangling. They've tortured me all my life. Now I'll torture them." These were allegedly Sarah's last words. She passed away on March 26, 1923, in her son's arms. Sarah was given a public funeral a few days later by the Municipal Council of Paris. Hundreds of thousands of her fans lined up in the streets to watch as Sarah's coffin was carried through the city to the Père Lachaise Cemetery, where Paris's most renowned residents were buried. As author Catherine Reef described, "For 3 days, life in Paris halted. So many people had seen Bernhardt on stage or on screen, or had read about her adventures, that Parisians felt that they had known her. How strange it was to think that she was dead. And it was not only Paris that grieved Sarah. She received eulogies from all over the world. As the New York Times wrote, "No temperament more historic than Madame Bernhardt has, perhaps, ever existed. To read her memoirs is to live in a whirl of passions and adventures, floods of tears, tornadoes of rage, deathly sickness and incomparable health and energy, deeds of reckless bravado, caprices indescribable and enormous, the marvelous voice of gold, that wide range of beautiful movement, queenly, sinuous, terribly alluring, that intensity of passion and that bewitching sweetness have brought men and women of all degrees, from professional critics to ranchers, from anarchists to kings, from men of pleasure to Puritan ladies, in homage to her feet." As the author Maurice Rostand once said, "Ah, for beings like Sarah, death is not only an end, it's a beginning as well. The life may be surrendered, but the legend lives on. Sarah has not been forgotten, nor has she been replaced. Her mysterious throne remains empty." Today, Sarah's legacy lives on in many forms. In 1960, Sarah was inducted into the Hollywood Walk of Fame and was given her own star. The Théâtre Sarah Bernhardt ran until 1967, honored today with a Café Sarah Bernhardt next door. In 1976, a biopic based on Sarah's life was released, starring Glenda Jackson. In 2005, the Jewish Museum in New York put on a special exhibition titled Sarah Bernhardt, The Art of High Drama, the first ever major museum show fully devoted to Sarah. And there have been a number of well-researched biographies on Sarah released over the last half-century. But in today's episode, we hope to honor Sarah's legacy as one of the greatest actresses to ever light up the stage. As an accomplished sculptor whose work received international acclaim, as a best-selling author of many books, as an entrepreneur who ran her own theater for over 25 years, as a die-hard patriot for her country, as a devoted and loving mother, and as one of the fiercest spirits to ever walk this earth. Of course, Sarah is best known for her immense acting career, but how she first fell into acting should not be overlooked. Sarah began acting as a means of survival, after years of neglect and emotional abuse by her mother. As the author Robert Gottlieb wrote, "We have to remember that Sarah began her training not as a girl desperate to act, for whom the stage was an irresistible attraction, but as a girl looking for a way out of a difficult situation. Born with an immense amount of resilience, Sarah used acting to carve a new path for herself and take charge of her own life. Though it took many years of undeterred determination, Sarah eventually went on to become one of the most successful actresses in modern history. Audiences all over the world fell in love with Sarah on the stage. As author Catherine Reef beautifully wrote, "No one ever forgot seeing Sarah Bernhardt act. She walked on stage with a smile, as if thanking the audience for coming. Briefly, she was herself. Then, she transformed into her character almost by magic. People remarked again and again that they fell under a spell. They forgot they were watching Sarah Bernhardt and believed they were seeing Cleopatra, Prince Hamlet, the Queen of Spain, or whatever character she was portraying. Audiences cried with her, they laughed, they cheered, and they adored her. And, as author Mark Twain once famously said, there are 5 kinds of actresses: bad actresses, fair actresses, good actresses, great actresses, and then there is Sarah Bernhardt." And what is even more remarkable is that Sarah was able to take control of her own career, managing her own shows and tours, and eventually even owned and operated her own theater, where she not only starred in its productions, but directed and designed the costumes and sets. Being in charge of every aspect of her own career was an almost unheard of feat for an unmarried woman of her time. As author Robert Gottlieb continued, from the moment she quit the Comédie Française in 1880 until her death 44 years later, she was in complete control of her career. Playwrights vied for her attention, leading artists and composers were at her disposal. Her tours were, for the most part, sensational successes. Step by step, she had morphed from being a figure of scandal to being a magnificent artist, to be venerated as a great symbol of, an ambassador for, France. And she certainly was an ambassador for France. Sarah was a lifelong patriot of her country. In the Franco-Prussian War, she stayed behind in Paris and ran her own makeshift hospital for wounded soldiers. And in World War I, she performed for soldiers on the front lines while still recovering from the amputation of her own leg. Sarah was equally loyal to her son. Unlike her own mother, Sarah was a devoted and loving mother who doted on her son at every chance she had. And the devotion was certainly reciprocal. After Sarah's death, her son went on to run the Théâtre Sarah Bernhardt until his own death in 1928. And Sarah's creativity did not stop with acting. What is lesser known about Sarah is that she was also an accomplished visual artist. Her sculptures were accepted into several different years of Paris's prestigious Salon, and later were shown internationally. She had her own artist studio, and despite being the most sought-after actress in the world, still made time for her own artistic practice. Her sculptures are skillful, complex, and burst with life. And regardless of the fact that many men of her time, like Rodin, dismissed her sculptures as an attention-seeking habit, Sarah's remarkable work speaks for itself. Sarah was also a best-selling author who wrote works of fiction, her own autobiography, and her reflections on the art of acting. And she was a fashion icon who worked with top designers to design her own unique and forward-thinking clothing. But above all else, Sarah was an inexhaustible force of nature. She faced her hardships head-on, whether it was her mother's neglect, her early failures in theater, or the amputation of her own leg, and never let anyone or anything stop her from standing in her own power. Sarah seeked out adventure, craved the thrills of the unknown, and lived to laugh and love. As her friend Jules Lemaitre once said of Sarah, "She alone is more alive and more incomprehensible than 1,000 other human creatures." Sarah lived every minute of her outrageous life to the fullest, and though her inevitable end eventually came, it's no surprise that Sarah's legacy lives on with as much gusto as she lived her life. We end today's episode with a quote by author Robert Gottlieb. And so, Sarah Bernhardt is still with us. Her name remains the paradigm for great actress, like the way the name of Einstein does for genius. She is still the most famous of all French women after Joan of Arc, and the most famous French personality of the 19th century after Napoleon. But perhaps the most lingering effect is that her name and fame resides in the minds of the untold number of women, so many of them Jewish, who, when they were acting up as little girls, were lovingly scolded by their parents with the words, "You're a regular Sarah Bernhardt." I hope you have enjoyed ArtMuse's 2-part episode on Sarah Bernhardt. I have included images, resources, and suggestions for further reading on the ArtMuse website and Instagram. ArtMuse is produced by Kula Production Company. Today's episode was written by me, your host, Grace Anna. Stay tuned as I continue to share the stories of the women behind some of the world's most important works of art. Until next time, bye for now.
Now at McDonald's, a McDouble is only $2.50. So you can get your gym gains on or just get lunch for only $2.50. Get more value on the under $3 menu.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.